Chills. Well done.
Lord Jeffery Archer. May I now invite our school director, Dr. Shalini Advani.
Good morning. A very, very warm welcome to Lord Archer and to all of you here. I know some of you have come from a long way away, and at Pathway School Noida, we feel so privileged to be able to host Lord Archer and have him come. He was curious in the previous 5 minutes about school education in India, about all of you and what listening to him and why you're here. Lord Archer is, of course, an old friend of India, not just because of his passion for cricket, which is legendary, and he has his own strong opinions on Virat Kohli. I'm not sure what he thinks of our brilliant bowlers that have just been showcasing themselves in Australia and New Zealand. In education, educators, we talk about certain 21st century skills, certain competencies. One of these is the ability to communicate across a range of people and types, and we'd say that that's a very important 21st century skill. The second one is all about keeping attention. In this age where everybody has a mobile phone in their hands, to get somebody's attention is a skill in itself.
Good morning. I'll try again. Good morning.
Good morning.
That's better. We'll try again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well done. It's lovely to be here. It's a very special privilege for me to be talking to such a large gathering of young people. I've had a very privileged life because I started life wanting to be a politician, and that went badly, and came to writing by mistake. Now the reason I mention this is because many of you in the audience may have ideas about what you want to do when you leave school and go to university. Don't be frightened to change your mind. Don't be frightened to go in another direction. I had wanted to be a politician and ended up writing by mistake. I didn't know that is what I was going to do, and there's no reason at your age why you should know what you're going to do. My wife began life as an academic. She was a chemist at Oxford, and she got a double first at Oxford, and she was going to be an academic. And at the age of 40, that must seem terribly old to you, at the age of 40, she suddenly changed her mind and went into hospital administration and became the chairman of a great hospital for 10 years. And then she changed her mind again at the age of 50, towards 60. And she is now chairman of the Science Museum in Great Britain, in London, the wonderful Science Museum. Mary is the first chairman, woman chairman. Now I say that to you girls because India's next generation is going to be run by women. You pathetic boys are in for a lot of trouble. Stand up, all the girls. Stand up, all the girls. Sit down, all the girls. Stand up, all the boys. One of my many loves of this country becomes a mutual love of cricket. And I have to say that I think at the moment, I hate to say it, I think India is probably the best cricket team in the world. Now we all know that Kohli is wonderful. We all know that he's the new Sachin Tendulkar, but I'm a Pajora man. I think he's very special indeed. But I'm going to tell you something that will horrify you youngsters before I get on to the serious part of the speech. Help me. I think 2020 is rubbish. I think one-day cricket is bearable. I like test cricket. That's what I like. And I like a real test match. And you had one here not so long ago between Australia and India, when VVS Laxman and Rahul Dravid remained at the crease all day after those idiot Australians had told you to follow on, and you stayed all day and then you beat them the next day. That's my idea of cricket. Now naturally you'll want me to talk about writing. As I say, I came to it by mistake. And I didn't start writing until I was 35 years old. And I didn't write Cain and Abel until I was 39 years old. Now I mention this only because your the head girl, she called the head girl, where is she? Where is she? Wave at me. There she is. She told me that there's a lot of people in the audience who are aspiring writers. All I would say to you is, there is no need to be in a hurry. It wouldn't be a bad thing for you to have another job before and to do your writing almost as an amateur and then take to it professionally, unless you've decided you want to be journalists, which is another route into it. So I started by mistake. I sat down when I'd left the House of Commons, I'd entered the British House of Commons at the age of 29. Too young. I was much too young. And I came out facing bankruptcy at the age of 34 and sat down and wrote my first book, Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, when I was 34. And the first 16 publishers I sent the book to turned the book down. I mention this because don't be frightened of rejection. Don't be frightened of not succeeding the first time. Because the first book was turned down, and then when the 17th publisher bought the book, Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, there you can see it, they only published 3 20,000 copies. And they just about sold them in a year. So the beginning was tough. And then it went into what you call, and we call in Britain, a paperback. And it sold 25,000 in the first month, and has now sold 27,750,000. So what it shows, it isn't the publishers. Where are my publishers? Bunch of idiots. It's not them that decide, it's the public who decide. Always, thank heavens, it's the people who decide. And so then I went on and wrote a book called Cain and Abel. And that did change my whole life, because that sold 1 million copies in the first week, and has sold now 32 million copies. But many people say, can you explain why you and the Indians get along so well? Why you are the best-selling English-speaking, English-writing author in India? And the answer is, I don't know. I've always loved India. I have, like you, a passion for cricket and literature and telling stories, but I've never been able to understand what it is that happens. Because I went to the Jaipur festival earlier in the week, and 7,500 people came to hear me speak. For an Englishman, that is staggering, and such a privilege, and such an honor. So I came to writing, let's go back to that, by mistake. So don't be frightened of thinking about doing 2 things, or 3 things. Now I'm going to ask you to remember only 2 things when I leave you. I can't remember, Director, am I taking questions? I am, good. When I leave you at the end, I will only want you to remember 2 things. This is one of them, so pay attention. You, 5th row from the back, are not paying attention. Your head is bowed. Yes, you, got you. Now, listen carefully. This is the first thing I want you to remember. There was a great writer-philosopher called Proust. Who's ever heard of Proust? Oh, gosh, well done. Proust said, we all end up doing the thing we're second best at. So don't be frightened of doing something else. Don't let that worry you. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Now, I'll tell you what I do at these speeches. I make a very short speech because I'm far more fascinated by what the next generation want to talk about. Because you see, it'll shock you. I'm just going to tell you a bit about the writing process. Writing process for me will puzzle all of you, because I'm so old and I'm so old-fashioned that I still hand-write every word. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I start writing at 6 o'clock. I write from 6 o'clock till 8 o'clock. I take a 2-hour break. I write from 10 o'clock until 12 o'clock. I take a 2-hour break. I write from 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock. I take a 2-hour break. I write from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. I go to bed at 10 o'clock, and I'm up again at 5:30 the next morning. And I do that for the first draft, which probably takes 50 days. Probably takes 50 days, about 350 hours, and all I've got is a handwritten first draft. The book here, the latest book that I've just written, called Heads You Win. This book that you have, and I can see one or two in the audience have it, this book is the 16th draft. There is no shortcut. I don't want I don't want any of you who think you want to be a Bollywood superstar or open the batting for India to think there's a shortcut. There isn't a shortcut. It's hard work. And I will tell you, you don't get to the top of anything. If you want to be a countertenor, if you want to be a violinist, if you want to be a ballet dancer, there is no shortcut. And there is no substitute for damn hard work. And I have to say, I have to say that where I'm very, very lucky, and I hope a lot of you will be very lucky in that sense, is I found something I really enjoy doing. Now I'm going to say something quite controversial, because in this country there seems to be a great thing about Bollywood and money and celebrity. Let me just tell you that for all the fame and all the money and turnouts like this all over the world wherever I go, my wife gets as much pride and as much pleasure in being chairman of the Science Museum, unpaid, because she is running one of the great museums on earth, as I get selling millions of books. The result is, Her Majesty the Queen has made her a Dame. So Her Majesty the Queen has acknowledged the role she has played, and she has never had, either as a teacher or as a scientist or in public life, she has never had a large salary, and you won't find a happier woman in Great Britain. So don't all imagine being a Bollywood star, making millions is what it's all about. It isn't. It's being able to say, I've done something worthwhile. And by the way, I go to work each day wanting to go to work. The worst expression you will ever hear in your life in Great Britain, and I don't want any one of you ever to say it. Oh good, it's Friday, I get the weekend off. You're in the wrong job if you say, oh good, it's Friday, I get the weekend off. I'll tell you what I say, oh hell, it's Friday, I can't wait for Monday. That's what the attitude we must have. Now, as I said, I learn as much from you as you can hope to learn from me. So I'm going to take your questions and listen to what you, the next generation in India, want to know about, and I will answer them as frankly and honestly as I can. And don't be frightened, stand up, say what you want to say, because I will tell you a secret. Grown-ups are pathetic. They ask questions, they want the audience to hear how clever they are. Always I find when I talk to young people, they ask real questions that they actually want answered. So who's going to have the courage to ask, you'll tell me when I've got to stop to him. You'll tell me when I've got to stop. Who's going to ask the first question? Oh, you're in charge, are you? How frightening. You're in charge? What's the point of view? Tell me what's the point of view. And you'll call out the name of the student? Yes. And they'll obey you? You hope so. Very good. A small round of applause.
Okay, for our first question, we have from Cambridge School, Noida, Saksham.
Where are you? Wave at me. I have to say to you, could you tell me the name each time?
Saksham.
I have to tell you, sir, never experienced writer's block. I've been incredibly lucky in that way. I get up to work and I go to my desk and I pick up my pen and I begin. And it just flows and flows. It never stops. It is a God-given gift. I can't do the ballet. I can't play the trumpet. I can't sing a song. Well, I can, but you hate it. I begin once upon a time and pray, and every time it just flows, and I'm so lucky in that way. I've got a home in Mallorca in Spain where I write, and I've called it Writer's Block. I've actually called it Writer's Block, but no, it's never happened. I did have a problem, actually. I'll tell you about a problem that happened once. I was writing a book called As the Crow Flies, and I'd got this man going to Australia. And he went to Australia because he wanted to meet a woman who would tell him the secret of the problem he'd had to sort out in England. And when he arrived, this old lady, when he arrived in Australia, he knocks on the door of this house, a sort of old people's home, and the door is opened by a lady, and he says, I need to speak to Mrs. Smith, whatever her name was, I can't remember. I need to speak to Mrs. Smith because he knows that Mrs. Smith can tell him the secret that will solve the problem for him in England. So I wrote that morning, just wrote down the words, that the matron came to the front door, looks at the man and says, I'm very sorry, she died 3 days ago. So I thought, lovely sentence, Jeffrey, but get yourself out of that one. And the problem was not writer's block. The problem was having set the reader totally in the wrong direction. I'd set myself totally in the wrong direction. It took me 3 days of walking around a golf course. Not writer's block. I couldn't solve it. And then, of course, in all good storytelling, it was simple. I turned the matron into a Scottish lady, and the Scottish lady said, oh, we have a letter she wanted to send just before she died. And I don't want to put a postage stamp on it. If you're going back to England, would you take it back and post it very Scottish? Would you take it back to England? And it's in the letter is the answer. But it took me 3 days for that simple.
The next question is from Ishika Yadav of Delhi Public School, Patodi.
Hello.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Sir, you are a successful author. So my question is, how hard is it to establish and maintain a successful career in writing?
To establish yourself, it's hell. Do you know? Let's start here. Stay there, don't move. Hands up everybody who wants to write a book. There you see. Look at that. Now, let me tell you the cold facts. What was that name? Ishika. Let me tell you the cold facts. For every 1,000 books sent to a publishers across the world, 1 is published. For every 1,000 books that are published, 1 gets into the bestsellers list. For every 1,000 books that get into the bestsellers list, 1 goes to number 1. So the answer to your question is, it's damned hard. But if you want to be the leading ballerina in the Bolshoi, it's just as hard. If you want to sing at the Metropolitan Opera House as a contralto, it's just as hard. If you want to captain the Indian cricket team, it's just as hard. But that mustn't stop you, because somewhere in this audience might be someone who will reach that peak, that will reach that height. So don't let it frighten you, but always be aware just how hard it is.
Our next question is from Nehal Agarwal, Pathway School, Noida.
To begin with, I was very frightened of Amazon, and I was very frightened of Kindle. because I like to actually have a book, to have and to hold a book. I like to turn the pages. And in this country, there is an amazing tradition for families reading books. Doesn't exist that I'm aware of. I don't know China well. And I'm not aware of it existing anywhere else in the world. Now, I have to tell you that my 2 children, who are pretty old by your standards, have pressed me into doing Facebook and Twitter and blog, and so I now have 4 million people on my blog and 250,000 people on my Facebook. But I can't do it myself. I get up and go to my secretary, called Alison, and I say, I want to tell the Indian people how well they've done against Australia, and I tell her what I want to say, and she presses all the buttons, because I can't do it. So I'm very aware of it. And the truth is, with Kindle, there are now more people reading all over the world in different forms. They are reading, they're getting to books in a different way. Wonderful for the author. I don't mind how I'm read, as long as I'm read. So I welcome any technology that allows the next generation to read. Because I still get at my age such fun. I've got a book in my hotel room which I'm reading, and I get so much fun from reading. And I'm always like to find new readers. And when I first came to India, I said to a very great Times critic, Times of India critic, great lady, she said, she put me on, I was about 35 at the time, 40, and she said, now Jeffrey, she said, stop reading the sacred cows, meaning all your Nobel Prize winners, and read R.K. Narayan. Who's read R.K. Narayan? Yes, of course. Village in India, who's having hard times with his wife, and he can make you turn the page. That's a God-given gift, and R.K. Narayan has it. But of course he had no modern technology, because he died before all of that. And poor old things like me are trying hard to keep up with you. But I'll tell you something to remember. Pay attention. What you think is modern today, your children and grandchildren will think you're so out of date and so boring and so out of touch. It's frightening what will happen in the next 50 years. And it's more frightening in India than anywhere else. Because what's happening in India is happening faster than anywhere else in the world. The changes I've seen since I first came here are staggering. This country, I'm terrified to say, this country is going to take over the world. I went to speak. No. I went to speak at the Royal College of Surgeons a few weeks ago in England. Already 25% of the Royal College of Surgeons are Indians. Now, here's something I haven't told anybody, because you're a bit young for this to even care or understand. But 5 years ago, I got prostate cancer, and my wife, being a scientist and having run a hospital, said, we must dig it all out. The only hope of you going on living, because otherwise it will spread and you will die. So we've got to dig it all out if you're going to live, Jeffery. And I'm going to give you the best surgeon in Cambridge, who just happened to be a Mr. Shah, who just happened to be an Indian. So thank you, India.
Good morning, sir. What was your inspiration for writing about the two alternate realities that you have in here?
The lady spoke, stand up, let's all see you. Ideas do come, and you can never be quite sure where they come from. But if you mix a lot, and see a lot of people, and run around the world, and you get ideas all the time. And if you read, you get ideas. And I was reading the biography of Colin Powell. Now, Colin Powell was Secretary of State to the United States of America, the second most important role in America, and he was black. And his mother came from Jamaica, and she wanted a better life, and she couldn't make up her mind whether to go to Great Britain or whether to go to America. And she went to America, and he became, as we all know now, Secretary of State to the United States of America. I thought, it puzzled me, what would have happened to him if his mother had decided she wanted to go to England. I don't think he would have become an officer in the British Army. I don't think he would have become Foreign Secretary. So I decided to write a story about a Russian boy who escapes from Russia with his mother, and the mother decides, shall I go to England or shall I go to the United States? I would send them to both. I'd send the same child to America and the same child to Britain, and follow parallel lives of the same child, and see what environmental circumstances, what difference it made for one to be in Britain and one to be in America. Hell of a challenge, and a fascinating challenge, to take these really two children and send them, the same child, through two different environments. But the answer to your question is, the inspiration was Colin Powell.
Member of Parliament in the UK. I wanted to ask you what you think of Brexit. And I mean, is it favourable? What are its consequences, not only for UK but...
Brexit has divided my country in half. It divides families. I voted to remain. My wife voted to leave. 52% of the country voted to leave Europe. 48% of the country voted to remain in Europe. And we're now stuck with the consequences. The problem is we have 650 members of Parliament who are at the moment debating what we should do, and we have 650 opinions. It's very difficult to get 10 members of Parliament to agree on one thing. So frankly, it's been a disaster. It's silly of me to say, you know, I wish we'd won it and we wouldn't be discussing this, but I can't see how it's going to end. Next Tuesday is tomorrow. Tomorrow is very important. They will be voting tomorrow in the British House of Parliament as to whether we will have another referendum and have a second go. I don't agree with that. I think if you've had one go and someone's won, you take it, and if you're the loser, you should be a good loser. But we'll see what happens tomorrow. Perhaps if I come back in a year's time, I'll be able to tell you what has happened. But it's quite possible, if I come back in a year's time, I will say to you, I still don't know.
Create compelling characters, both male and female.
Well, in the case of The Prodigal Daughter, I'll tell you two interesting things. Well, of course, writing about a great female who becomes the first president of the United States was a hell of a challenge. But what a bunch of wallies those Americans are. They still haven't chosen a woman to be president of the United States. And frankly, I think most women would do a bit better than President Trump. So it was a hell of a challenge. But I was very touched yesterday. I was in Jaipur yesterday, and I went to the palace. And very great honour for me, the curator of the palace gave me a private tour. I'm guessing she was 35, 40, and she's the curator of the palace in Jaipur. And she said, I've read The Prodigal Daughter 18 times. I said, I beg your pardon. Why, I say? Because it's an inspiration for women to realize what they can do, and how stupid are the Americans not to have taken any notice. But she said she learned from that when she was your age. When she was your age, she read it, and she said it inspired her to believe that she could do great things. And she's now the curator of the palace in Jaipur, and I think she's only 35. So, yes, it was hard, but I loved it. It was a great challenge. And I'm very proud to tell you, it was among Margaret Thatcher's favourite books. She loved it as well. So, yes, it was a big challenge to write about a strong woman. But then I'd been married to a strong woman all my life. Quite a frightening chance, beware. Beware. So, that was a challenge. And of course, following up Cain and Abel itself was a challenge. So the two books together. So you're ambitious, are you? Good. Say yes louder.
Yes.
Good.
Ankush.
That's great. Look at that. Yeah, go on.
Good morning, Lord Archer. My question to you is there any great novel?
Where are you? Where are you? Oh, there you are.
Is there any great novel that you have read yet failed to gain an interest in?
You see, there's an interesting word in your question. And the word is great. If you take the word great out of your question, the answer is again and again and again. I get fed up with second-rate writing. But the word great suggests straight away that it's an important book, and I should have read it. Now, the crueler part of your question is, are there any great books that I've struggled with? Oh yes. Oh yes. I found War and Peace a struggle, and I went on and on and on. So you mustn't expect, just because someone's won a Nobel Prize, that the book is going to be something you will enjoy. And because your teachers have said you must read this, doesn't also mean that you're going to enjoy it. You might learn from it. But the truth is that great writers are also storytellers. The Count of Monte Cristo by Dumas, Great Expectations by Dickens, Jane Austen. They're all great writers, but they're all great storytellers as well. And it's that combination. So the tough part of your question is the word great. Take that out, yes, endlessly I get to page 30 and think, why am I, and the older you get, the less you get past page 30. You just feel I haven't the time to waste on this. It's a very fair question. But don't be frightened of books that you don't fully understand, because there are still books at my age that I don't fully understand. Doesn't mean you won't learn from them. The great writers and the great storytellers you can also learn from. I have a love of the theatre. I'm mad about the theatre. I go to plays twice a week because the London theatre is so good. So I have a passionate love also of Shakespeare. What a storyteller! You all think of Shakespeare as one of the greatest playwrights ever. Who has read or seen Romeo and Juliet? Right, let me tell you, all you who put your hands up, you know the ending. Imagine if you came to that for the first time and you didn't know what was going to happen between the young man and the young girl. Which one would die? Would they both die? Would neither of them die? His genius is not just with the written word. His genius is as a storyteller. Do you know, if I had a wish, it would be to remove my knowledge of Shakespeare and the great writers from my head today, so that I could read them for the first time. That's the privilege you have, believe that. Come on then.
Okay, Bhumika from DAB Kailashans. Your question, please.
You don't know what a question is because it's not written there. It's a surprise question.
Sixth book of Krypton Chronicles, Omid the R, you mentioned that Sebastian falls for a girl named Nadira, who is an Indian girl, belongs to Mumbai. So I wanted to ask you that how were you able to write about something you are not much familiar with?
Quite right. Now their director is a classic example. I get that question badly worded every day. Why don't you write a book about India? This young lady has hit the blooming eggshell on the head and said, how dare you write about India? She's quite right. You should write what you know about, what you feel safe with. So I've never had the courage, and never would, write an Indian novel. But I've been here so often that I felt I could write about an Englishman falling in love with an Indian girl. Damn it all, every time I come to India, I fall in love with an Indian girl. So why shouldn't I write about it? So it was a desire to write about a little bit I knew about India. But of course she was semi-educated in England as well. So I wrote that combination. I just liked the challenge. The way you've been very cool, and you are right. You should not stray into someone else's country. The great Indian novel will be written by a great Indian. It's very hard because you can't get under the skin. You can't get the innuendos. You can't get the tiny things that you would know more about now than I know about. That's what you see in Arcane Orion. You see that he gets under the skin and touches everything. So I write much more about England and the United States, which I love. And I would be frightened to write a full-length novel of India. But I didn't mind writing about one girl who Sebastian falls for. I hope you enjoyed it. But you said number 6, so I hope you read number 7.
I'm on it.
You'll be able to say the words that I'm going to say after this lady has asked her question.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
My question is that many times when I sit down to write and I finish writing a short story or a poem, I am confused about the title. It's very difficult because a story or a poem has many aspects to it. Yes. So how do you decide what you name it, what the title is?
Yes, how do the titles come? They're often in the story. Not a penny more, not a penny less is on about page 130 of the book. And my best friend at Oxford said, you've got the wrong title, Jeffrey. The title's on page 130. And he said, and I went to my pathetic publishers, and they said, it's too long, Jeffrey. Not a penny more, not a penny less. It's too long. They like short titles. Kill! They like short. And I said, I insisted, I thought Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less was a good title. So that one came in the book. So when you read your next short story, see if there's a little phrase you've used. See if there's a sentence you've used or a word you've used. Now, Cain and Abel was originally the protagonists. And then it became the brothers. And then it became a rivalry. And I was walking along the embankment in London one night when suddenly, Cain and Abel. And you know in a split second, you've got a magic title that will last, if the book's good enough, will last and last. In fact, when the book first came out and I was unknown, the title was Cain and Abel, and right at the bottom by Jeffrey Archer, because no one had ever heard of me. But you'll see, even today, the title is as big as the name. And why? They've done a survey on the book. It's now in its 40th year, 124 reprints, and they've done a survey, and more people have heard of Cain and Abel than have heard of me. So they've decided that the title will still be, 40 years later, bigger than the author. So I think if you look at what you've written, and you made a very sensible statement, short story is a good way to start. I mean, if you're a poet as well, lucky you, I could never write poetry. But short stories is a good way to start, getting the feel of the thing, because sometimes you can get into a short story. You can only do 20 pages. It won't make a novel. Some incident. I had an amazing incident in India, in Mumbai, where I was sitting at a table. I was sitting next to this stunningly beautiful girl. Stunningly beautiful. She was about 30, 35 years old. And her husband was sitting opposite me. I want you to imagine a circular table. I'm the guest. I'm sitting down. I sit next to this stunningly beautiful Indian girl. And over there is her husband, who is so good looking. So I think, wow, what a couple. So I think I'll flirt with her and try and make him jealous. And he's not bothering at all. And we're talking about an Indian who's been educated at Harvard Business School. He's not worried about Jeffrey Archer. He can just push him aside. And at the end of the dinner, on a circular table, I discovered he was in a wheelchair. And they wheeled him out. And I knew immediately there was a short story there. Immediately. And one of the best short stories I've ever written is about those two, Jamal and Nisha, the amazing couple, who he got injured the day he was married. And we're talking about a tall, handsome man who had everything. I knew there was a short story there. And I called it Cast Off, because she was a lower caste. And it mattered in those days. I would have to ask you if it still matters. She was a lower caste than he was. But he was in love with her. He's a Maharaja. He fell in love with her, and his parents didn't accept her. And because she's been such a wonderful wife, they've come round to realizing what a tremendous girl she is. But that was a short story I picked up in India, sitting at a circular table, and someone on the other side. I knew immediately there's a short story there. So keep going, because I will tell you, when I was in Chennai, a 12-year-old girl came up on stage. I said, anybody want to come? And a little girl came up, stood next to me. I put my arm around her. I said, what are you going to do? She said, I'm going to sell more copies than you. 12. So I saw her when she was 14. I said, what are you going to do? She said, I'm going to sell more copies than you. She's already written 2 books. She's 16. She's already written 2 books. I said, what are you going to do to sell more copies than you? So I took her on one side with her parents, standing there, very Indian, standing parents, standing there with my 16-year-old girl, telling her how she's going to be one of the great novelists. I said, you've got a problem coming up. Young lady, you've got a problem, because you're very bright, and you're going to do very well. There's no doubt about that. You've got a problem. She said, what's the problem, Jeffrey? I said, men. You're about to discover men. And she said to me, age 16, men are a complete waste of time. And they are not going to get in my way. I love you. Now concentrate, because I'm going. I'm leaving you. And it's been wonderful, wonderful. What a wonderful thing. What a wonderful thing to tell my wife about this great school and what it's trying to achieve. And if you've forgotten me in 10 minutes, that's fine. If you've forgotten me in a year, that's fine. But don't forget, what I'm about to tell you. You can either write it down or make a note of the person who said it. Pay attention. Only the stupid ones will not remember it. There is a poet, you'll love this, it's a poet, you'll love it. There is a poet in America called Longfellow, great poet. And I'm going to tell you something he said, and then you can live by it for the rest of your life. Pay attention. The heights that great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, strove ever upward through the night. Thank you.
Opportunity to meet in person an author who has mastered the game. And we've all been mesmerized by the arrows from his quiver full of experiences. On behalf of Pathway School Noida and the entire gathering here today, I wish to thank you, Lord Archer, for gracing us with your presence.
I noted when I came in that the top person in the school is a girl and the second is a boy. Long may it be so. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. No, listen. No. I'm just going to say goodbye to them. I'm going to say it's been a real privilege to see the next generation of this great country. Thank you very much.
you.